Yeah. This is Gillie Priest of Gillie Priest Revolutionary Radio. And today I want to build the reason around emotion and sentiment in relationship to how we see and deal with fundamental issues. From a sociological perspective, I want to deal with the construction of the family, and then the construction of society. As a matter of fact, I'm going to deal with the construction of society first, since the construction of society is on a macro level, whereas the construction of families is more on a micro level. The construction of families, there are various theories of what society, of what sociological development we are living in that derive from a particular historical context. And because we are in Western civilization, and as an appendage, and dealing with Western civilization and trying to figure it out in order to maneuver it or outmaneuver it in the struggle for total liberation, I'm going to touch upon 4 sociological constructs that has enveloped us within the last 2,500 years. You basically have to deal with the spiritual construct of society, which is really theological, and what some would refer to differently as spirituality. There is a Marxist construct of society. There is the Friedrich Nietzsche construct of society. And there is what we refer to in the more modern time as neoliberalism. And during different stages of human development, each of those may predominate at a different time. I'm going to deal with the Marxist construct of society first. And this is not to indoctrinate anyone to any form of Marxism. It is just to show you how, from that ideological perspective, how society is seen to be constructed or should be constructed by some who is of that ideology. But what I want us to look at as I describe these sociological constructs is the relevance they may have or may have had at a particular time of our development, whether in the past, in the present, or in the future. Now, I'm also going to touch upon these sociological development in a summary fashion, not to get in any fine detail, but to give an overall macro view of these structures. When you delve into the Marxist theory of the construct of society, especially capitalism, the Marxist theory in a nutshell is basically that the owners and the means of production is what ultimately produces the culture of that society. There are those who may try to make or propagate the position that it is culture that produces the Marxist doctrine. But dealing with the Marxist doctrine is basically the owners and means of production derived out of the greed of individuals who are able to operate together as a unit in order to protect and enhance their own interests. Deriving out of this greed, this desire to accumulate wealth, institutions such as laws, education, cultural prerogatives, and anything that develop within that society are all subsumed and subordinate to the wishes of the capitalist society. Even the form of government, the government that today that you could say, okay, there are confusion at times between people, inability to distinguish between democracy and capitalism. And there's a particular reason for that inability. There are machines in society, especially academia, that try to create that confusion. So in the common man's mind, they equate capitalism with democracy. Capitalism, basically in a nutshell, is the accumulation of wealth through private enterprise, whereas democracy is how one chooses to distribute the influence of power to the lower classes of people. In some society, it is restricted more than some. In some society, the common man has more say than in others. In some society, even though it may appear that you have more say, in reality you have less say within that society. So, from the Marxist perspective, the evolution of capitalism evolved out of greed. And out of this greed, these capitalists had a desire to protect what they had against the lower classes of people. So they created laws, they created political system, they created an economic order, they created a moral dispensation, they created an ethical dispensation. All of these are organic and plays a fundamental role in securing the interests of the capitalists. So what you have to be careful of today, since we are in a capitalist society and in a society that evolved out of imperialism, this is what we have to be aware of. The moral standards that we try to adhere to today is a moral standard that reinforces the capitalist doctrine. The ethical standard that most of us in a society adheres to is to reinforce that capitalist system. I'm not here to tell you whether it is negative or positive. I'm just here to point out to you that you must be aware that each and every aspect of the society that we live in is a mechanism to reinforce the desires and wishes of those who are in charge of the system. So within this capitalist system, let's look at morality, because a lot of us run around and preach certain moral standards, believing that these moral and ethical standards exist in a vacuum. That these moral and ethical standards cut across all sociological order or all political order, which in reality it is not. When capitalism, which is what the Marxist theory tried to define for us, to put it within its historical context so we can see it for what it is. The moral and ethical standard is that which ties us to the system morally and ethically. You look at the educational system. Do you really understand what education is? Do you believe that education is universal? No. Every society gears its education towards reinforces the desires and wishes of the ruling class. And this is one of the things that the Rastafari movement must realize. Because sometimes when I listen to the reasoning from the Virgin, especially when they touch upon moral and ethics, they don't really understand what they're saying. They are just parroting phrases that were imbued in them that they believe are universal phrases, when in reality they are appendages to the economic system under which you live. So we kind of get that in a nutshell from the Marxist theory. The ruling class of a capitalist society grew out of greed, and therefore all institutions that evolve in that society is to protect the interests of the capitalists, included moral and ethics, which create a certain boundaries that you reinforce is against your own interests, because you were indoctrinated with those moral and ethics. So that's one. We deal with the Marxists. We're now going to look at the theological aspect. And when I define all these four different sociological orders that gives us what we call society, they are not mutually exclusive from each other, but they impact each other at different times, at different levels, for different reasons, yet to reinforce the desire and wish for whoever at that time or the ruling class within that society. So theologically, what it practices that government is a desire of the gods, and those who rule in the name of the gods are the chosen. So there are certain societies that you go into where, if you go back to the ancient days in Europe or the ancient days in Africa, there was this belief that the ruling class were established by God, and therefore to disobey the ruling class is to disobey God. So this is a form of theocracy, and this is what most Rastafari propagates. Like I said, I'm not here to critique whether or not it is right or wrong, but I want us to get a clear understanding of these ideologies that we propagate and where the interest of these ideologies lies at. So we speak of theocracy. Theocracy is a government that is ordained by God. This is the ideology of theocracy. And an ideology that is ordained by God is unquestionable. It is dictatorial because it is allegedly coming from the Almighty. So when God says, this is what the government must do, even when the masses of the people believe that that decision is a wrong decision, you cannot go against it, because if you go against it, you are going against God. And this is what you find. And again, I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong. I'm saying if you go to countries that practices a theocracy, like what you call today, we are most familiar with Islamic governments. Those are governments that are established upon the dictates of the scriptural doctrine that they have, even if that scriptural doctrine was written 700-800 years ago, for others written 2,000 years ago. What you actually have are decisions that are being made in the present society by dictates that were established 2,500 years ago. So when we are calling for a theocracy government, let us be careful what we are calling for. Because there's gonna come a time when you are not able to distinguish between an unrighteous man in leadership and a righteous man in leadership. And let me give an example where theocracy went wrong. Do you know where the word traitor comes from? It has a word that derived in North Africa as trajadores. And what that was, when they used to refer to the Christendom just as the church, because at that time the word Catholic was not invented yet. The term Catholic, which means universal, came about after the church started to get competition. So they tried to propagate that the doctrine that they prescribe to and propagate is of a universal order. And that's why they applied the term. So let's go back to when it was referred to just as the church. And at that time, the church was centered. They're going around the year 300, the year 400, the year 200, when the church was centered in North Africa. We have great African theological scholars. For the church was not based in Europe, but was based in North Africa. The Augustinian doctrine and other various doctrines that govern the church, where the first popes came from in North Africa. But we're not going straight on the topic. And there arose in the church when the African church, the African section of the church was ruling the church. The leaders of the church that was based in Rome took exception to the church being led from Africa. So when they amass a certain type of power, they sent messages to the leaders of the church. That time we're talking about when the church was in Tunisia. At that time they named Tunisia. When the church was in Carthage. When the church was established in a certain places in Egypt. They send messages to the leader of the church and said, turn in all your documents to the European as part of the church. And the African leaders of the church said, no, we are not going to turn over the documents. So when the bishop of the church that was ruling in Africa died, I can't recall his name right now, the church in Rome appointed a leader in Africa and said they had the right to appoint the leadership in Africa. And then the Africans at that time turned around and appointed their own leader to the same diocese, the same church. And therefore you had what may have been the first critical split in the church. Who has the right, or who had the right to appoint a leading bishop in the church? Was that power bequeathed to the church in Rome, or was that power bequeathed to the people in Africa, who were the leading academicians and the leading theologian for the church? And keep in mind, when I say the church, we're talking about the Christian church, but it was simply referred to as the church. And what happened was some of the leaders in Africa started to side against their own Africans with the leaders of the church from Rome. And therefore, the Africans who were loyal to Africa started to label those who had sold out to the Roman as the trajadores. And that is where the word traitors come from. Those who were the first traitors in the church that betrayed Africa to the Roman aspect of the church. So a struggle developed now between these two different leaders within the same diocese. In which of these leaders was the power of Christ? We're speaking of what they call Christ, Jesus. And that is not the reason whether I mean Jesus or not, but I'm just dealing with the historical aspect now of theocracy. In which of these two leaders is the power of God resides? And does the power of God reside in the individual, or does it reside in the office which he or she holds? These are deep theological questions that we are not going to get into, but I hope that as time expands and I get this opportunity, I'm going to get into each of these different aspects. And a great fundamental one that we are going to delve into is when you speak of theocracy and you say a man is acting on behalf of God, does that power lays within the individual that is appointed, or does it holds to the office to which he is appointed? And that simple question caught up in the church in Europe and Africa for hundreds of years. And that question was also tied to whether Jesus, who they refer to as the Christ, whether that Jesus is God or man, or God and man. And that is what led to the split of the church, where you have Eastern Orthodox Christian, which one of the branches established in Ethiopia. And you have the Western Roman Church. Those are the two fundamentals that split the church apart. And for centuries never came back. So me and you now go to solve that out in one reason. So when you call in for theocracy, and you want theocracy rule to cover the earth, bear in mind that you're calling for a very centralized, theocratic, sociological order, which is restricted to those few individuals who the institution is going to acknowledge and empower as the speakers and acknowledgers of God. And when you broke it down to its simplest denominator, you are calling for order for one man for rule over. We are just limited to Africans. Over 2 billion people and one man going to say, God tell him say. Him alone have what it takes to decipher scripture. And that is basically the nutshell of theocracy. The rule and domination of a theological doctrine to which each and every individual, whether they believe it or not, is bound to. Right? So we deal with Marxism in a nutshell, and we deal with theocracy in a nutshell. There is also a less recognized in written form sociological order, which is racial superiority. And keep in mind, Marxism, theological doctrine, and supremacy, racial supremacy, are not mutually exclusive of each other, but they can also be intertwined at different times, at different places, for different purposes. But I'm just defining them exclusively for a better understanding to the brethren's ancestry. Now, when you talk of racial supremacy upon the face of the earth, it is a doctrine where, like I said, I'm not get into whether them right or wrong, but it is a doctrine where you have to look at and say, alright, what's good for the goose to the gander? You know? What that mean? If you say the black man is superior to all other race upon the face of the earth, when the white man get up and say the white man is superior to all race upon the face of the earth, you can't ball about that. Because to expect the white man to say the black man is superior, even if he believe it, to expect him to act off such a disposition is infantilism. And the Chinese will have a right to say the Chinese race is the superior race upon the face of the earth. Therefore, but let's come back to where we are dealing with. We as a people in the West, we are dealing with white supremacy as a doctrine. From we encounter these people for the first time, even in Africa. And even though there are several and different ideologies who preaches this doctrine, the ideologies that is most adhered to by European who believe in white supremacy is that of the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, an individual that lived in the 1800s, I believe. And what Friedrich Nietzsche doctrine actually is saying, it is not just saying that white supremacy is an acknowledgement of the white race over all other race. But he also dealt with supremacy in a class basis. Because he's saying even when you're in an all-white society, those members of the society who are able to rise to the top of that society, they are naturally superior even to members of their own race who are of the lower social status. So even forget about a moment, because that alone tell us, if you have white people that have a doctrine that whites are superior to some white, then you know that doctrine is equally applied to all whites are superior to all other non-white race throughout the face of the earth. Now, when you get into Friedrich Nietzsche doctrine, it's a very intriguing doctrine, and he is or was an individual who is still highly respected as an racial ideologist throughout the world, and it was his ideology that was adopted by Adolf Hitler that led to World War II. See? And one of the most intriguing aspects, and I want you to listen to me carefully, I mean, I say them things if you don't believe it or not believe it. But just I try educate. See? When you get into the depth of Friedrich Nietzsche doctrine, Friedrich Nietzsche said, a people that adheres to any form of a god or any religious indoctrination is nothing but a mark of their own inferiority. So basically what I must say, a man who is inferior and who acknowledges his inferiority is who runs to religion. That is part of Friedrich Nietzsche doctrine. That is the doctrine that is upheld by every racial institution on the face of the earth today. And that is why you see Europe is gradually moving itself away from any type of theological doctrine. That is why the churches are being weakened. And you must realize that the more you see the churches are being weakened throughout Europe, is the more racial superiority doctrine is taking hold within the society. So let's look a little bit closer to this racial doctrine by Nietzsche. But to fully understand it in relation to the weak that runs to religion, one of the pillars of this doctrine is that the same act that is perpetrated by the ruling class in a society, that the poor rejects, they turn around within their theological doctrine and accept it by asking God to impose it upon their enemy. You ever look on the thing them where religious people ask God to do to them enemy? You ever look on the thing them where religious doctrine preaches that them going to do to the enemy of God? It is the same desires and wishes and acts that the rich inflicts upon the poor. But through the poor can't get up and inflict it upon the rich, he must ask God to inflict it for him. Remember, I give you Friedrich Nietzsche doctrine. I'm not giving you Gillie priest doctrine. I give you Friedrich Nietzsche doctrine so you can understand the society in which we live and why it acts and reacts a certain way. So going like people call them brimstone and fire upon the enemy. Did you know that one time the rich used to throw down brimstone and fire upon the disempowered? So the disempowered turned to God and said, God, I really want to brimstone and fire the rich and the powerful, you know, but me don't have the power to do it, so me ask you to do it. And then they put it in a God mode, say, when him come, he might go flash brimstone and fire. So make you ask yourself a simple question from the Friedrich Nietzsche position. Why do the religious call for fire with damnation upon the wicked? When in reality, if you listen to their doctrine, they're supposed to say, there should be no judgment for the wicked, because we are different from the wicked. The wicked inflict judgment upon us when we do not obey their orders. Why are we now turning around theologically and calling for the infliction of the same punishment upon the wicked? And if a man turns to God and asks God to inflict punishment upon his enemy, you know what I tell you, say? If that man who believes in God could inflict it himself, he would not have turned to God. All he would have to do is do it and say God tell him to do it. And these are thoughts you have to think about in a family. It don't mean you have to believe it. But you need to cipher out them type of ideology so you know where you stand in a creation and you know where you really are fight against. When you have a people believe in a racial superiority doctrine, no moral and ethical appeal to him can't work. Or if it do work, it will go work on an individual basis. It not go work collectively. You know how long the oppressed are tell the rich and powerful same is act that the actions of the rich and powerful is reprehensible. That are going from the beginning of time. And you can't change a collective society one by one. So the point I try to make is that when you go anywhere in Europe and you say white racism is being practiced, it's coming from the doctrine of Friedrich Nietzsche, where the society is being ordered, the society is being structured around the doctrine of Friedrich Nietzsche. The Friedrich Nietzschean ideology. Racism is not a little thing like it's a play thing where a man just look at you and say you're black and he hate you. And also this thing work. This thing is embedded within an ideology that is instituted within every agency within any given society. And therefore the moral and ethics that's govern a racial ideology structured society is to reinforce that society. Just look at apartheid. We think it's a joke thing when a people can construct a society, around white superiority, and them people that go to church every Sunday and say, yes, them God. You think that theological order there is separable from the political order in that society? It's one thing when you better give Babylon credit for him known for order society. Him known for structure it. When we not get into whether I'm right or wrong, I'm structure it for the benefit or not the benefit. We are talking about people who learn to structure their society free of sentiments and emotions. And that's the way we have to understand. Most of it, we're full of sentiment and emotion. We're full of Babylonian doctrine. You know, we do enough of the Babylonian doctrine, then we're imbued in a way. We change the pronunciation of certain words and to make it sound more militant, and then we say yes at that. So when a man go up and for example, and a man hear a man say, oh, Jesus Christ. Somewhere, that word sounds too soft. That word doesn't sound militant enough for a man like me. So hear me now, no? Jesus. And we think that make the character behind the name change. We must understand that the ideological doctrines are there to reinforce the desired order of that society. See? So in a nutshell, we dealt with the Marxists. And we dealt with the theological order. And we dealt with white supremacy and the supremacy doctrine and where it come from and how it is tied to have certain vision of religion, where basically I tell you say, the weak and the powerless turn to God to seek the same damnation that's being inflicted upon them. So white supremacy no respect no religion. As a matter of fact, the more them see you run to religion, and the more them say to themselves, yes, we are collect all of the weak under the umbrella of the false doctrine there. So what you find in the Friedrich Nietzschean doctrine is that there's a perpetual war between white supremacy and theology. Because white supremacy believe that the theological doctrine is there to check them. And that is why Europe rejects theological doctrines today. I want to touch upon another one. Right? We give you the view of capitalism from the Marxist position. But I want to give you the view of capitalism from the capitalist position. In a nutshell, because everything will come in a summary, we don't have time for going depth in everything. But in the capitalist doctrine, them start from the premise that every individual human being is born with what they call natural rights. Rights that cannot be given or taken away by any government on the face of the earth. And it is from this doctrine all the other capitalist doctrine evolve. Now, what is this basic right where them see you're born with? So when an individual is born, he or she has the natural born right to perpetuate your own individual life. And when the institution of family was developed to perpetuate the existence of that individual life. And how does a man perpetuate his own life? He needs food. So therefore, coming from that right, a man has the right to secure food in order to perpetuate his life and that of his family. So those are rights that no government has the right to take from you. Again, and what I say, I give for them doctrine. So we can clearly understand why the society we live in function the way it functions. And when there is a competition for food amongst different individuals and amongst different families, each individual and each family has the right to secure the means to perpetuate their existence. And if that takes the right to border off a piece of land and say, this land is mine and can defend it, that is part of his natural right. So that is why when you read in the Constitution of the Europeans, private property takes precedence over life. Enough people understand that. In America and Europe, you can get more time to violate a man's property than violate a next man's life. Ask anybody who travel to them European country, you see it. You go over there and you kill a black man. I forget about black man. You kill a person and you go before certain court. Them offer you all type of plea. 3 to 9, 2 to 6, 10 year, 50. You violate the wrong man's property and you can lose your life. And then give you a natural life. One man in America back in the 50s, him get 50 years to thief a black and white TV. Another youth in Florida get 40 years for thief a orange. You think you can look on the judge and just say, oh, that judge is wicked, look at him get a little picnic 40 years. No, the judge is defending a deeper concept of the right to property, which bring forth after you own that property, your liberty and your desire of freedom. It's a whole network of ideological beliefs in my defend when him get a little picnic the 40 years. But if you turn around and kill that little picnic there, because the picnic thief they arrange, that society will reward you for upholding the law and the right of property. Right. So after you deal with the natural rights, and there are more natural rights within the capitalist doctrine than just property. And see, but you are derived from that, the right for your right to survive. And anything that is tied to your right to survive is a natural right. So how do you protect this natural right according to the capitalist is given to you by God? That is what capitalism is, and that is what the capitalist ideology protects and propagates in all its educational institutions. But you think them talk about free will? You think free will and just free will for them? Your free will is your right to defend that ideology and kill for it from freedom perspective. And if every man has the right to defend his God-given natural rights, which is protected by the constitutions in these other various countries, that doctrine is tied to where every individual is responsible for his own survival. And all of that get trickled down when you hear we are out a certain road. We have the right to buy and sell. And we have the right to do what me feel to do. And me have the right to a man not tell me what to do. You think them utterances is just independently separate from each other. It tied to the capitalist doctrine and the imperialist doctrine that was embedded in us from in another time, I will be in another dispensation for more than 400 years. So when we utter certain simplistic terms and we take it and we preach it as common sense, because you don't know where it's tied to. It's tied to your own oppression. Because it's tied to a legalized form of exploitation to which you is giving your consent. And society expect you to give your consent to your own oppression. So you know what you're supposed to say as a sufferer and a poor man? I tell you what you're supposed to say. From the Friedrich Nietzsche doctrine, you're supposed to say, yes, I am inferior, and my status in society reaffirms that. And from the capitalist doctrine, you're supposed to say, I am a no good bastard in society. Because of the fact that I am where I'm at is a substantiated fact that I'm a worthless individual. So look on the contradiction from your poor man perspective. You have a moral and ethical standard that you adhere to that keeps you in poverty. So upon one hand you put fire upon Babylon, and upon the next hand you perpetuate Babylon moral and ethics. And while you're perpetuating Babylon's moral and ethics, that substantiate your inferiority, you know, and accept your inferiority. You are running in your vagabond state and perpetrate, but you're superior. What a mockery. What a mockery that is. It's a laughing stock, man. Straight laughing stock. And this is not to condemn you, when I use them terms there, I use them terms so you can go reflect in your inner self. Journey within yourself. That's the furthest journey any human being can take place on the face of the earth. It's not without, it is within. reflect on the common terms that you get up every day and I say, this is your right. And you don't realize that the right the way you reaffirm and keep you in the position where you're there. It only sounds good morally and ethically. And you believe that these moral and ethics are somehow universal. Every aspect that you see within the capitalist society, whether good or bad, is of the doctrine of which you yourself believe. I mean, I say whether it's right or wrong in our family, me just try to point out to you and point out to all of us in the reasoning. So most of us live a collective life of contradictions. So I'll give a quick recap before I add a summary to it. From the Marxist position, the capitalist society is built out of criminality. The strong and the powerful gather their wealth, and they believe that the way they gather it is their natural right to gather it, which has no appendages to moral and ethics. And when them get it, them form laws, rules and regulation and institutions to protect it. Theological doctrine, which some of us believe in, is basically God rules through government. And therefore, if you challenge government, you're challenging God, because God rules us through government. And anything the elective few within the theological order prescribe, all humanity is bound to it. Now, sometimes when you look on the theological doctrine, I will kind of segue a minute. You say, if we just look on our own malignant character, most of us who are called for theological order and theocracy, we can't live under it, you know. It only sounds good when we are called for it, most of us. But I tell you something, you can say, drop down here. I want to see when I turn around and ball the loudest. Who did I call for it? So we deal with the Marxists, and we deal with from the capitalist perspective, and we dealt with from theocracy perspective, and we dealt with from white supremacy. Now choose anyone and reflect upon any one of those, whether singularly or in combination. Those are the doctrines that encompass our life on the face of this earth. May I speak of Africa for the last 2,500 years. So when we run from one and we run to the other, we are run from pillar to post. And that we do. Just like when a society in Jamaica, we run from PMP to JLP, and when we get tired of JLP, we run back to PMP. America, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, we as people at a certain social status, we become bouncing ball between ideology. And when we get tired of the two main economic ideology, which is really one or two different sides of the same kind, some of us now run to theocracy. Say, boy, if God could only come rule. Well, enough government on earth where them say God rule, you know. So either you come with a little simplistic reason and say, alright, for them God not real, so therefore the rule is wrong. Or you will say, the political ideology is not being practiced the right way, that is the reason why it should come. Nah, man. Don't confuse ideology and the action of man. It takes man to enforce ideology. And a man have no capability to correctly enforce any ideology 100%. Because human nature is so strong. And I say something, I can a little segue right there. So that is what gives capitalism its greatest hold on the face of the earth, you know. And that is why capitalism is going to be one of the most hardest institutions for this earth get rid of. You know why? And not because whether it's right or it's wrong. It's because the fundamental tenets of capitalism is built upon the fundamental basic human nature: greed, lie, thief, treacherous, betrayal. Those characters that lies within us is what make you a good capitalist. So it is built and formed around our natural nature. And when I say natural nature, I use natural in the terms of something that is embedded so long it becomes that second nature. When I talk about whether God did give you that or not. But if we be true in a family, if we be true, and a man come to 99.99% of us and tell you, say, you can make $1 million for nothing, even though you have better judgment, tell you, say, are you last thing that your heart going to peel while you go for it? You're going to convince yourself through some moral and ethical deformity that what you're doing is right. But you know it's wrong. But apart of it, we have been farmed for 2,500. We have seen how the rich and powerful get rich and powerful. And therefore we rationalize it and perpetuate those same upon the common man around us in our community. And when we venture out, I'm not getting that again whether you're right or wrong. When we venture out on a daily basis to find food to survive, that last thing within us is what gives us strength to bar a certain vision within our cranium and do what we have to do so when we come home we can eat. And that was what bargaining in the marketplace is about. You go to the merchant and the merchant say $1, you try to bring him down. And you try to bring him down to a point where you now feels that yes, I get something of more value than it is worth. And when him do the same thing as the merchant, when you pay him, left and him say, yes, I got more than the product is worth. And both of you leave each other feeling pleased that you have out-cheated each other. So, I'll give a summary now. Society is a literal sociological and ideological construct that is there to benefit the ruling class of any society. And wherever you go and hear this misnomer that society is structured to benefit the lower class, that is a deception. You know, they have a thing when them tell me a long time, What's historian, I believe, is who impart this knowledge to me. He said the height of deception is piety. The height of deception is piety. What that mean? The more righteous this your individual act is, the more corrupt he is, either physically or ideologically. And how do you demonstrate that in a simplistic terms? A man who is not challenged in his character and in his mental capacity, a man who is not challenged to X degree to do wrong, he has no compulsion to demonstrate right. No, you have no compulsion to demonstrate right. If I am not afflicted with desires to do wrong, whether morally or ethically, then naturally I have no need to get up every day and I preach to anyone about what is right and what is wrong. I have the need because I am not inflicted by those challenges. But when you see a man go to church every day, or him go to the temple every day, and him kneel down, and him weep, and him ask for forgiveness, and him ask God to empower him, you know what really about him? Are the multiple challenges that are come at him, mentally, physically, and spiritually, that him believe is the path to condemnation, and him face it and fight it every day. And that hold him down on him knee, and in the church, and in the temple, and in the synagogue, and this, and that. Right? And we can give a simile to that. A man who can meet him everyday needs in a very relaxive and accumulative way. Him not get every day and I worry about how to make $1, Nah, man. I'm not get every damn work for make a dollar, man. Me worry about how to get more just to have more. But it's not tied to him survival. You see the man where him labor only feeds him for 1 day at a time. He gets no rest from thinking about his needs, man. Well, the same thing with those who used to perpetuate piety every day. Get up every day and God this and God that. I know righteous him is or how righteous she is. I know the world must be condemned. And them have challenges, you know. You think a man need to go see the psychiatrist if he have no psychological dysfunction? Nah, man. You think a man who have water get up every day and go look water and preach about water? Nah, man. So we must understand these things, that we are enveloped within society, where we are constructed and restricted by ideological doctrines that rules over us. And the sad state is that these doctrines that rules over us, choose which one you want to choose, or choose your preference. It embedded in us a moral and ethical doctrine where the state itself have no longer needs to police and govern us. This state gives us a moral and ethical doctrine where we police ourselves, where we indoctrinate and perpetuate our own suffering by the doctrines that we believe is somehow sent by God. When it not sent by no God, it is sent by the ruling class. Those are things we have to think about. So I want the brethren to think about ideology, because ideology is what, and sociology is what envelopes up in every society which we find ourselves. These are not concepts that are just happenstance, where you believe you can escape without dealing with the system. So when we're speaking of Rastafari as just a segment of the population, if you believe, say, by you having a Benz and living at the mansion upon the hill, you escape Babylon. You don't escape Babylon, you're more entwined in it. And this is not to discourage the accumulation of wealth. I am not trying to discourage the accumulation of wealth. As a matter of fact, I will go as far as to reaffirm the desire and the encouragement for the accumulation of wealth. But you must have a particular mentality behind your accumulation of wealth. Else you're going to serve Babylon purpose. Remember one time some youths in the ghetto, in my youth days, they were like legends within our societies, in the lower class. Especially when you hear them go uptown, go up where the rich and the famous live, and rob the rich and famous, and then come back together, and people used to worship them in the ghetto. But here where the greatest disappointment come now. When them go uptown and rob and murder and do what them ever do, forget them goods, them care back the money, go give back to the same merchant rich class downtown. So we're talking about the ideology behind the money, the ideology behind the getting of the money. That is what is important more than the money. Some people don't even understand wealth, and one of them times when the reasoning I come upon the Gillie Priest revolutionary and broke down what wealth is, and broke down the difference between rich and wealthy, and broke down the intricacy between them, which demonstrate you why it's not a threat when the system gives you $1 billion if you have to spend back the $1 billion with them. Because the clothes you wear you can't make it, the car you drive you can't build it, the house you live in you cannot design it. Everything you have to do is bring back the $1 billion to them. Where on the flip side you can have a man who don't have $1 billion but he have 1 million, but he's more wealthy than you. You know why? Because he controls some aspect of the means of production where he produces. So that are the reasoning for today, brethren. The different ideological and sociological construct that govern our life. And how we buys into a moral and ethical standard that is given to us by the ruling class in order so that we are able to police ourselves, so that society do not have to police us, so that the state does not have to police us. And with that basically I tell you, so when you go in a society, the more you obey the laws and orders of that society, is the more you have brought into a moral and ethical standard that perpetuate those that govern over you. I mean, I tell you whether you should do it or you not should do it. You try to impart a certain knowledge to you so you can sieve out the scrape on which you stand. And when you buys into a certain theological doctrine and you're calling for theocratic government, no way you call for, you know. No way you're calling for. So when that one man they come and say God said, you hold it, and you call for it, or me call for it. So that's what the brethren and sisters was another good reasoning from my perspective. I hope that the eye them, both brethren and sisters, scribers and listeners to this revolutionary leader, find something edifying about this reasoning. And as we goes on in this reasoning, as time goes on, I keep producing more. My intention is to carry the brethren them on a more intellectual depth, you know, on a more depth of reasoning. And then after a while, or simultaneously with what I'm doing on the academic level, we are going to institute the practical, you know. We are going to institute the practical. We're not going to hide behind academic pursuit in order to avert the responsibility of practicality. No. And then going, as usual, for Pine to Iron production, Forged by Time, I may ask the item support with it. And this book I wanted to go the distant. I may already do it unabashedly, you know. I want to sell 1 million copies of it, and it can't be done without the support of the brethren and sisters. And it encompasses not only my individual struggle, but it encompasses to a larger degree also the struggle for freedom and justice, the struggle for the freeing of the innocently imprisoned throughout the earth. It encompasses the struggle of the Rastafari movement within New York State and within the entire United States of America, and to bring to the fore the knowledge that this struggle was coming from behind bars. You go to America and contest any violation of your religious rights in America. The struggle that we wage, Benjamin versus Coughlin and other cases, are way do that. And no pietist and no pious man in a society do that. Because we don't claim no right or no height of piousness. Me at least don't claim none of that. See, I'm going to try to do good by those who I'm able to. One thing with my struggle in the family, I don't struggle for going to heaven or going to Zion, you know. That's not my struggle. Whether I'm dead or not, that's not my struggle. My struggle is to do the best I can amongst my brethren and my sisters. And try not to violate no man's space. But me, I'm not struggle with no man. So until next time, my brethren and sisters, give me any support to the book. This is Gillie Priest of Gillie Priest Revolutionary Radio. One God, one aim, one destiny, peace, love and unity. Manners and honors. Rastafari.